Thank you, Madam Speaker. In June last year, when the pandemic was entering a particularly acute phase in Australia, the New South Wales government suspended Parliament. Faced with a sudden, rapid rise in COVID-19 case numbers and apparently acting on health advice that we never saw, they put a temporary stop to the normal democratic process. We were the only state in Australia to do so. On the face of it, that might have seemed to be a good idea, given that health advice warned against any large indoor gatherings, which is what Parliament basically is, because research showed that large gatherings of people were a major vector for spreading the disease. But while there may have been a pretext for it at the time, the suspension went on for months longer than it should have. Once the fog of confusion had passed and a clearer view of what was happening emerged, the government should have recalled Parliament to chart a path to safety. While the state continued to operate, as it always does because of amazing people working at a local level, at the highest level, the government bunkered down, continuing to issue orders and make decisions, but without the usual checks and balances afforded by a sitting Parliament. While it might be argued that the unprecedented public health emergency necessitated unprecedented measures, suspending Parliament was actually counterproductive because it narrowed the government's vision at a time when they should have been more open to a wider range of solutions to the crisis and to be more transparent to the public, who were confused, concerned about what was happening and who needed to be better informed. It left many people feeling abandoned and helpless. In the report from the February 2022 Munich Security Conference, an annual meeting where matters of international security are discussed at a high level, they talked about the global sense of learned helplessness that has come about as a result of a series of global crises facing us, among them the pandemic. The report said that this sense of helplessness, the feeling that nothing can be done about our dire situation, has resulted in our liberal democratic institutions coming under fire. To quote the report, this perception is highly dangerous because it can turn into a self-fulfilling prophecy. Societies that have concluded they cannot solve humankind's most challenging problems might no longer even try to turn the tide. It further says that this is the time we should be shoring up our democratic institutions. The combination of strong democracy at home and reliable cooperation among democracies abroad is still the best hope for dealing with these challenges. By suspending Parliament for as long as it did, the government undermined our democracy, and it went further than that. Calls for papers were held up for months, making a mockery of the government's claims to be transparent and accountable. One of the fundamental principles of democratic government is that the incumbent administration opens itself up to the scrutiny of other elected representatives. It allows voices from outside the party in power to call the government to account for its actions, to point out the problems with what it is doing and draw attention to any other oversights. When a government ignores these checks and balances, it can run into serious problems. The exchange of ideas is a vital part of the democratic process. It allows a range of voices to be heard and points of view argued. As a result, the ideas that are best for the people and the running of the state can emerge. It is also essential to avoid problems such as self-interest or blind prejudice creeping into public administration. The idea of an assembly where ideas regarding the future of the people and the running of the state that can be discussed is an ancient one, going back to at least 3000 BC in Mesopotamia, when the power of their king was restrained by assemblies. Those gatherings inspired the more famous assemblies of ancient Greece. Over the centuries, while monarchs, tyrants and dictators have often ruled without the advice of assemblies, the representative assembly has emerged time and again. In Rome, Switzerland, Iceland and even amongst the Vikings. In the 20th century, the era where many nations adopted broad suffrage, some political leaders used state emergencies to bypass democracy, but usually to their detriment. Whatever the motives, whatever the crisis, governing without a sitting Parliament leaves a government vulnerable to making bad decisions, ones that are blind to the sort of local realities and peculiarities that only members from that electorate would know. Even with a global emergency, especially with a global emergency, it is a dangerous precedent to set to move away from democracy in any way. And Madam Speaker, I'd really like to thank the 20,000 plus people who took the time to sign this petition in a very short amount of time. There was a huge amount of support from the community to see this matter debated, and I really hope that we can learn from the previous shutting down of the Parliament and hope that we never see that happen again. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank the member for Barwon. The question is that House take note of the petition. I call the member for Coffs Harbour.